The sun over Vexor Prime hung low and swollen, bleeding crimson through the crystalline spires of the celestial court. Inside the grand atrium of the royal palace, a vaulted chamber of living obsidian veined with pulsing aquamarine light, the air hummed with restrained tension. Luminous vines curled along the archways, their petals blinking slowly like drowsy eyes, while servants in iridescent silks moved soundlessly, carrying trays of nectar fruit and chalices filled with shimmering, bubbling wines. At the heart of it all, seated upon the sunstone throne that glowed faintly with the warmth of a captured star, was Princess Zara of the Silthari Dominion. She was regal, otherworldly, and dangerously beautiful. Her skin shimmered with the deep emerald of jungle canopies seen from orbit, smooth and flawless save for the faint bioluminescent tracery that ran along her cheekbones and collarbones like ancient script. Her hair, long and white as frozen starlight, cascaded over her shoulders in soft waves, catching the ambient light like spun moonstone. But it was her eyes that unsettled most, large, almond-shaped, the color of molten gold, and capable of shifting from playful amusement to battlefield lethality in a heartbeat. Today they sparkled with mischief. Across from her, standing uncomfortably in the polished onyx floor's reflection, was Corporal Jorik Veldrin, human, unarmored, and sweating through his borrowed ceremonial tunic. It had been stitched together from what the palace tailors insisted was court-appropriate fabric, though it clung to him like a second skin and smelled faintly of ozone and crushed petals. He'd been dragged into this situation against his will, yet again, after having survived the Battle of the Shattered Moons by sheer dumb luck and a talent for jury-rigging plasma cores with duct tape and prayer. Now, weeks later, after being declared a hero of the Dominion for accidentally destroying a rogue war drone that had threatened the royal convoy, he found himself back in the palace, not as a prisoner, not as a guest, but as something else entirely. He hadn't seen Zara since the battlefield. Back then, she'd been half dead, her royal cruiser torn apart by rebel separatists, her guards slaughtered, her escape pod breached and venting atmosphere into the void. Jorik, scavenging for salvage in the debris field, had spotted the pod's flickering beacon, against orders and against common sense. He'd boarded it, patched her wounds with medgel meant for engine burns, and dragged her unconscious form onto his battered hauler. He hadn't known she was royalty. He'd thought she was just another alien casualty in a war that didn't belong to him. But when she woke, her first words weren't gratitude. They were, "You smell like engine grease and regret." Now, standing before her in the throne room, he felt the same mix of awe and absurdity. "You requested my presence, Your Highness?" Jorik said, voice stiff, trying not to stare too long at her glowing skin. Zara tilted her head, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her lips. She rose from the throne with fluid grace, her bare feet silent on the warm stone. "Heard you wanted a wife, human?" she said, her voice a melodic hum laced with something sharper. Teasing, yes, but with an edge of command that made his spine tingle. Jorik's mouth went dry. "I what? No. Who told you that?" "The whisper vines," she said, gesturing to the flowering tendrils above. "They hear everything, especially when a certain human mutters in his sleep about never finding someone who understands plasma couplings or sarcastic comebacks." He flushed. That was just, I was talking to myself." Zara stepped closer. She was taller than he remembered, her presence overwhelming, like standing too close to a live reactor. "And yet," she purred, "you also said something about wanting someone who doesn't flinch when you spill synth coffee on your uniform. Someone who laughs when you trip over your own boots. Someone, blue-eyed, stubborn, and strangely good with a hydro wrench." "I said green," Jorik blurted, then immediately wanted to vanish into the floor. Zara's golden eyes widened, then crinkled with laughter. It was a rich, unexpected sound, like wind chimes in a thunderstorm. "You noticed my skin tone while I was unconscious? How flattering." "I noticed everything," he admitted quietly, then winced. Not like that. I mean, I had to make sure you weren't bleeding out or turning purple or..." She placed a single finger on his lips. It was cool, smooth, and carried the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine. "Relax, Jorik Veldrin," she said. "I'm not accusing you of impropriety. In fact," she stepped back, spreading her arms, "I'm offering you a position." "A position?" he echoed. "The position of my consort." The room seemed to tilt. Jorik blinked. "You're joking." "I never joke about matrimony," she said, though her eyes danced. "Among my people, it's a sacred bond, equal parts alliance, affection, and absurdly complicated legal paperwork. But in your case, she paused, her expression softening just a fraction. You saved my life. You didn't ask for reward. You didn't even know who I was. That kind of selflessness is rarer than stable wormholes in this galaxy. Jorik swallowed. But I'm just a mechanic. A grunt. I fix busted freighters and swear at broken NAV computers. I don't belong in palaces. I belong in engine rooms with grease under my nails and a half-eaten protein bar stuck to my boot. And yet, Zara said, circling him like a predator who decided to spare her prey, for now. You stood your ground when the Separatist commander threatened to execute you unless you revealed my location. You lied even when they jammed a pain inducer into your spine. That's not just courage, it's loyalty. And loyalty, she said, stopping in front of him again, is the rarest alloy in the universe. Before he could respond, the grand doors at the far end of the atrium shuddered open with a deafening clang. Not by servants, but by force. A squad of armored figures stormed in, their black carapace armor shimmering with anti-energy shielding. Their faces were hidden behind faceless helms, but their insignia was unmistakable. The twin fangs of the Vorgoth Syndicate, a rogue mercenary faction that had been terrorizing border systems for years. At their head stood a towering brute, his armor scorched and dented, a plasma cannon slung over one shoulder. His voice boomed through a modulated speaker. Princess Zara, surrender yourself and the human, or we burn this palace to its foundations. Zara didn't flinch. She didn't even turn. Ah, right on schedule. Jorik frowned. Schedule? She shot him a look that was equal parts exasperation and fondness. I may have let slip in diplomatic channels that I was considering a human consort. The Syndicate hates interspecies unions. They see it as weakness. I knew they'd come. You used me as bait? He hissed. Not bait, she corrected. Bait is passive. You, Jorik Veldrin, are a spark. As if on cue, the palace's defense systems roared to life. Panels in the walls slid open, revealing automated turrets humming with charged energy. But the Syndicate had come prepared. One mercenary hurled a disruption grenade, and the turrets sputtered and died. They've jammed the network, Zara muttered. Of course they did. Jorik's mind raced. He'd spent weeks in this palace, and even in his downtime he'd mapped every conduit, every power relay, every emergency override. The main reactor's still live, he said quickly. If I can reroute auxiliary power through the old coolant vents. Do it, Zara said without hesitation. She turned to face the invaders, raising her hands. Bioluminescent energy swirled around her fingers. Silthery royal bloodlines carried innate energy manipulation, a trait honed over millennia. With a flick of her wrist, glowing tendrils shot forth, wrapping around two mercenaries and hurling them into the ceiling. They crashed down unconscious. But more poured in. Plasma bolts scorched the air. One grazed Zara's shoulder, and she hissed, but didn't falter. Jorik ducked behind a pillar, pulling a multi-tool from his belt. He pried open a floor panel and plunged his hands into the tangle of wires beneath. Sparks flew. He cursed, rewired a junction, then slammed the panel shut. Distantly, deep in the palace's core, a low hum rose in pitch. The lights flickered, then blazed brighter. The turrets reactivated with a vengeful whine. Chaos erupted. Energy beams crisscrossed the chamber. Mercenaries screamed as they were cut down. Zara moved like liquid shadow, dodging fire, retaliating with bursts of emerald force that shattered armor and sent enemies flying. Jorik sprinted toward the central console near the throne. He bypassed the main control with a quick splice, then uploaded a command sequence he'd written the night before, just in case. Override code. Veldrin Zara, he muttered. The palace responded. The floor beneath the remaining Syndicate forces split open, revealing hidden containment fields that sealed them in stasis bubbles. The leader roared in fury, firing his plasma cannon wildly, but the beams deflected off newly activated shields. Within 30 seconds, the chamber fell silent, save for the crackle of dying embers and Zara's heavy breathing. She walked over to Jorik, blood trickling from her shoulder, but her smile was triumphant. You just hacked a 3,000-year-old royal defense grid with a pocket tool. I've worked on worse, he said, wiping grease, and maybe a little blood from his brow. She touched his face, her golden eyes searching his. Why did you come back, Jorik? After everything. You could have taken your medal, your credits, and vanished into the outer rim. But you stayed. He hesitated. Because I kept dreaming about you. he admitted. Not in some romantic, starry-eyed way, but, you called me Grease and Regret. Remember? And then, when you laughed for the first time on my ship, it sounded like the universe finally made sense. Zara's expression softened. You're ridiculous. And you're terrifyingly beautiful, he shot back. She laughed again. That same wind chime laugh. And this time, she didn't stop him when he reached out to brush a strand of white hair from her face. But their moment was shattered by a new sound. The deep, resonant chime of the oracle bell. It hadn't been rung in over a century. Zara went rigid. No! What is it? Jorik asked. The bell only sounds when the heart of Vexor is in danger, she said, her voice tight. It's the core crystal that powers our entire world. If it's compromised, then your planet dies, Jorik finished. She turned to him, her gaze fierce. The Syndicate didn't come just for me. They wanted to lure me away from the sanctum while their real team infiltrated the core chamber. Jorik didn't hesitate. Then we stopped them. No, Zara said firmly. It's too dangerous. The sanctum's defenses are lethal to non-Silthari. Your biology, it won't survive the resonance fields. Then modify me, he said simply. Temporarily. You've got tech that can rewrite a man's DNA for a week, right? She stared at him. You'd risk your life. Not just for me, but for my world. I already did once, he said with a shrug. Might as well make it a habit. Something shifted in her eyes. Something deeper than gratitude. Warmer than admiration. She nodded once. Then we move fast. They raced through hidden corridors, past gardens of singing flora and halls lined with statues of ancient queens. Zara led them through passages that shimmered with shifting walls, her hand gripping Jorik's tightly. He noticed how her skin pulsed faintly with each heartbeat. Not from exertion, but from the growing distress of the planet itself. Vexor Prime was in pain. When they reached the sanctum, a cavernous chamber beneath the palace where the heart of Vexor floated in midair, a pulsing crystal the size of a small ship, what they found made Jorik's blood run cold. A dozen Syndicate engineers were already there, attaching explosive charges to the heart support matrix. At the center stood a woman in silver armor, her face uncovered. She had the same green skin as Zara, but her eyes were cold, black and empty. Sister, Zara whispered. Lyraxis, Jorik breathed. The exiled former heir, the one who'd tried to overthrow the throne 5 years ago and vanished into the void. Lyraxis turned, her lips curling into a cruel smile. Ah, the human and his pet princess. How quaint. You betrayed your own blood, Zara said, voice trembling with rage. I liberated it, Lyraxis snapped. Our people stagnate under your weak rule. Marrying a human? Pathetic. The galaxy mocks us. But with the heart destroyed, the chaos will birth a new order. One I will command. You'll doom billions, Jorik said. Sacrifices are necessary for evolution, Lyraxis replied coldly. Then she nodded to her engineers. Detonate. The charges beeped to life. Zara lunged, but the resonance field flared, throwing her back. She screamed as her body convulsed from the energy backlash. Jorik didn't think. He ran not away, but toward the heart. Jorik, no! Zara cried. The field hit him like a wall of fire and ice. His bones felt like they were dissolving. His vision blurred. But he gritted his teeth and kept moving, driven by sheer will, and the memory of Zara's laugh in the dark. He reached the first charge. His hands were shaking, his skin blistering, but he ripped out the core module. Then the second. The third. Lyraxis snarled and fired a neural disruptor. The beam struck Jorik in the back. He fell to his knees but didn't stop. With the last of his strength, he tore the final detonator free and crushed it in his fist. The chamber fell silent. Lyraxis stared at him, disbelief turning to fury. You, insignificant grub. She raised her weapon again. But Zara was on her feet, fury blazing in her eyes. Energy crackled around her like a storm. You will not touch him. What followed was a battle of sisters. Light against shadow, love against ambition. They clashed in midair, energy bolts and psychic strikes colliding in bursts of emerald and obsidian light. Jorik watched, bleeding and broken, but refusing to close his eyes. Finally, with a scream of anguish and rage, Zara unleashed a pulse of pure royal energy, a forbidden technique that drew on the heart itself. Lyraxis was hurled backward, crashing into the chamber wall. Her armor cracked. She slumped, unconscious. The The sanctum settled into a soft hum. Zara collapsed beside Jorik, cradling his head in her lap. "You idiot!" she whispered. Tears, actual glowing tears, rolling down her cheeks. "You could have died." "Worth it," he rasped. She kissed his forehead. "Then live. For me." Back in the palace infirmary, days later, Jorik awoke to the scent of jasmine and the soft glow of bioluminescent moss. Zara sat by his bedside, her white hair braided with silver threads, her green skin healed but still shadowed with exhaustion. "You're awake," she said, relief flooding her voice. "Told you I'm hard to kill," he muttered. She smiled, then grew serious. "The heart is stable. Lyraxis is in stasis. The syndicate has scattered. And—" she hesitated. "The council has agreed to my proposal." "Which one?" "That you become my bonded consort. Not just in name, in truth." Jorik sat up slowly, wincing. "I don't know the customs. I don't speak your full language. I still trip over my boots." Zara took his hand. "You're honest. You're brave. You fix things, engines, defenses, even broken princesses. And you make me laugh when the galaxy feels too heavy." She leaned in, her golden eyes holding his. "So, heard you wanted a wife, human." This time, Jorik didn't flinch. He smiled. "Heard you needed a husband who knows how to rewire a plasma core with a paperclip." And in the heart of the royal palace, beneath a sky streaked with twin moons and swirling nebulae, something new began. Not with fanfare or decree, but with two hands clasped together, human and alien, grease-stained and glowing, bound not by duty, but by choice. Far away, in the silent corridors of the Syndicate's hidden fortress, a single transmission pulsed through the dark. "The Vorgoth are not defeated, only delayed. The human must die. The union must be shattered." But for now, in this moment, there was only peace, and the quiet hum of a story just beginning. Weeks passed in a rhythm neither Jorik nor Zara had expected. Not the stiff formalities of court protocol, nor the cold distance of political alliance, but something softer, stranger, and infinitely more dangerous: intimacy. They trained together in the dawn courtyard at sunrise, where Zara taught Jorik how to channel minor resonance pulses through his nervous system, a borrowed trick from Silthery bio-weaving, made possible by the temporary genetic harmonizers embedded in his spine. He, in turn, showed her how to hotwire a Class V hoverbike using nothing but a bent fork and a capacitor from a discarded comms unit. She laughed so hard she nearly shorted the bike's anti-grav field. Their bond, once forged in battlefield necessity, deepened into quiet understanding. He learned to read the subtle shift of her bioluminescent markings, the way her collar tracery dimmed when she was sad, flared gold when she was angry, or pulsed in slow, rhythmic waves when she was content. She memorized the cadence of his silence, the way he'd rub his left thumb over his knuckles when nervous, or hum old earth folk tunes under his breath when he thought no one was listening. But peace, especially in the Dominion, was never more than a breath between storms. It began with a whisper in the palace's data streams, a corrupted signal buried beneath routine astrogation logs. The Vorgoth hadn't just scattered, they'd reorganized, and they'd found an unlikely ally: the Calyx Concord, a neutral coalition of technomonks who guarded the ancient neural archives of the Andromeda Veil. What made this alliance terrifying wasn't its military strength, but its access to something far older than warships: memory-warping resonance tech. "They can rewrite synaptic imprints," Zara explained one evening in the Starlight Gallery, her voice low. She'd pulled Jorik aside after detecting anomalous energy spikes near the outer rim. "Not just erase memories, but implant false ones. Convincing, seamless, undetectable unless you know what to look for." Jorik frowned. "So they could make someone believe they've always hated you? Or that they're your enemy? Or that they never loved you at all?" she said quietly, her golden eyes holding his. A chill ran through him. "They're coming for us. Not just us," she said. "For the bond itself. Because if they sever what's real between us, the entire Dominion fractures. My authority is tied to the authenticity of my choices. If they can prove I was manipulated by you, by emotion, by human weakness, they'll declare the throne vacant." The attack came 3 nights later, not with ships or soldiers but with silence. The palace's AI went dark. All internal comms failed. Even the whisper vines grew still, their petals closed tight like sleeping fists. Then came the intruders. Not in armor, but in seamless gray suits that bent light around them, their faces hidden behind smooth, featureless masks that emitted low-frequency pulses. Jorik awoke to Zara shaking him, her skin pale with fear. "They're in the memory sanctum," she whispered. "They're targeting the bond registry. Every Silthary royal bond, every marriage, alliance, and consort pact was inscribed not on paper, but in quantum-laced crystalline lattices that resonated with the emotional truth of the union. If the Vorgoth altered the registry, they could retroactively rewrite the legitimacy of Zara's claim to the throne and Jorik's place beside her. They moved through the palace like ghosts, avoiding patrols of disoriented guards who seemed dazed, confused, some even weeping without reason. Early signs of neural tampering. When they reached the sanctum chamber, they found the door unsealed. Inside, two gray-suited figures hovered over the central lattice, their hands weaving patterns of dark energy into the glowing filaments. Zara didn't hesitate. She unleashed a pulse, but it passed through them like mist. "They're phased," Jorik realized. "Not physically here. They're projecting into this dimension through a resonance bridge." "Then we collapse the bridge," Zara said. "How?" She turned to him, her expression fierce. "We amplify our bond. The registry responds to authentic emotional resonance. If we flood it with raw, unfiltered truth, it'll overload their frequency." Jorik's heart pounded. "You mean, in front of them? Let them see what they can never replicate," she said, stepping close. "Love that chooses itself, again and again." She took his hands, closed her eyes, and opened her mind to him. Not just thoughts, but feelings. The first time she'd seen him, covered in grease and singing off-key to calm his nerves while welding her escape pod. The way he'd stayed awake for 3 nights straight just to monitor her fever after the plasma wound. The quiet pride in his voice when he finally pronounced her name right. Zara, not Zara or Shara. In return, Jorik gave her his own memories. Her laughter echoing in his engine room. The weight of her head on his shoulder during a meteor shower. The moment he realized he'd do anything, die, fight, rewrite the stars, if it meant she'd keep smiling like she did when he told a terrible joke. Light erupted from the lattice. The chamber filled with golden-white energy, pure and searing. The gray figures screamed, a sound like grinding glass, and vanished as their bridge shattered. The palace AI rebooted with a soft chime. Outside, the whisper vines bloomed open, releasing a chorus of relieved sighs. But their victory was short-lived. As they caught their breath, a new alert flashed across the chamber wall. A Priority 1 transmission from the orbital defense grid. Footage showed a massive vessel emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. A ship unlike any in known records. Sleek, obsidian black, shaped like a coiled serpent, its hull bristling with weapons that pulsed with violet energy. "The Serpent of Calyx," Zara whispered, her blood running cold. "It's not a ship. It's a living weapon. The Concorde's last creation, sealed away after it devoured its own creators. And it's heading straight for Vexor Prime," Jorik said. Worse still, the ship broadcast a single message on all frequencies, spoken in a voice that sounded eerily like Zara's, but hollow, distorted. "Surrender the human. Surrender the false bond. Or your world will remember only silence." The Dominion's high command urged immediate evacuation. Zara refused. "If we run, we confirm their lie, that our bond is weakness," she declared before the Royal Council. "We stand. Together." Jorik stood beside her, not as a consort, but as an equal. He'd spent the last 48 hours retrofitting every available drone, shuttle, and defense turret with a new algorithm, one that didn't rely on targeting coordinates, but on resonant echoes. "If that ship is alive," he'd explained to Zara, "then it has a heartbeat, and every heartbeat leaves a signature." As the Serpent entered orbit, it didn't fire weapons. It unleashed a wave of neural static, a blanket pulse designed to erase identity, to reduce every living mind on the planet to blank slates. But Jorik's system activated just in time. Every drone, every turret, every palace spire began emitting counterfrequencies. Not random noise, but recordings. Zara's laughter, Jorik's off-key humming, their shared silences, their arguments, their whispered confessions. A symphony of real, messy, human-alien love. The Serpent faltered. The smooth movements grew erratic. Violet lights along its hull flickered erratically. Then, impossibly, it emitted a sound. Not a weapon discharge, but a low, mournful wail. "It's remembering," Zara realized in awe. "The Concorde must have imprinted it with their own memories before sealing it away. And our resonance, it's waking something in it." Seizing the moment, Zara broadcast a direct neural link to the ship. Not a command, but an offering. "You are not a weapon. You are a witness. Remember who you were." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the serpent rose, slowly, gracefully, turning away from Vexor Prime. It fired its engines, not in attack, but in retreat, vanishing into the void as silently as it had arrived. Back on the surface, the people cheered. The council bowed. But Jorik and Zara stood apart, hands clasped, hearts pounding with the aftershock of survival. Yet even as the stars above seemed to sigh in relief, a single encrypted data packet slipped past the restored firewalls. A fragment of code hidden in the serpent's final transmission. It burrowed deep into the palace network, undetected, and activated only when Jorik was alone in his quarters, reviewing schematics. A screen flickered to life. On it appeared a human face, aged, scarred, but unmistakable. "Jorik," the man said, voice trembling. "If you're seeing this, I'm already dead. But you need to know the truth. It was his father, believed lost in the Titan Belt collapse 2 decades ago. I wasn't just a freighter pilot," the recording continued. "I was a deep-cover agent for the Old Earth Coalition. My mission: infiltrate alien worlds, study their bonds, find weaknesses. But when I met your mother, a Silthari refugee, I chose love over orders. And they killed her for it. They've been watching you ever since. Waiting. Because they knew you'd be the one to bond with a Silthari queen." The screen went dark. Jorik sat frozen, the world tilting beneath him. Was his entire life a setup? Were his feelings for Zara even his own, or the culmination of a genetic and psychological program designed across generations? He didn't sleep that night. When Zara found him at dawn in the courtyard, he told her everything. She listened in silence. Then, without a word, she placed her palm over his heart. "I don't care what your blood was meant to do," she said, her voice steady as a star. "I care what your heart chooses. And it chose me, again and again. That's what's real." He looked into her golden eyes and believed her. But far away, in the ruins of a collapsed starbase near the Helios Rift, a new signal pulsed to life. This one bearing the insignia of the Old Earth Coalition, thought extinct for 50 years. And it was broadcasting a single command: Phase Omega, activate the sleeper in the consort. Jorik didn't know it yet, but the greatest test of his bond wasn't war, betrayal, or even memory. It was the terror of not knowing if his love was truly his own. And Zara, ever fierce, ever loyal, would stand by him even if the answer shattered them both. For now, they walked back into the palace together, the morning light catching in her white hair and his grease-stained sleeves, 2 souls from different worlds holding on to each other as the galaxy plotted their fall. The days that followed were shadowed by silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the tense stillness before a storm breaks. Jorik moved through the palace like a ghost of himself, his usual humor dulled, his hands restless, his eyes distant. He loved Zara. He knew that with every fiber of his being. But doubt is a slow poison, and the revelation about his father had poured it straight into his veins. What if his instincts, his choices, even his longing for her, all of it had been engineered? Zara watched him, a quiet ache in her chest. She didn't push. She didn't demand reassurance. Instead, she gave him space but never distance. She left his favorite synth coffee steaming outside his workshop door each morning. She hummed the same off-key Earth tune he used to sing while fixing her hoverbike, just loud enough for him to hear through the walls. And every night, without fail, she stood beneath his window until the light went out, her silent promise: "I'm here, however long it takes." Then, one evening, the palace's security grid pinged with an anomaly. Not an invasion, but a breach from within. A dormant subroutine in Jorik's neural harmonizer had activated. The Coalition's sleeper protocol, Phase Omega, was waking. It wasn't violent. It was worse. It whispered, not in words but in impulses: "Leave. She'll be safer without you. Your presence destabilizes her reign. You were never meant to stay." Jorik clutched his head, teeth gritted, sweat beading on his brow. The voice wasn't external. It was woven into his own thoughts, smooth and reasonable, masquerading as his conscience. But Zara knew. She found him in the memory sanctum, standing before the bond registry, trembling. "You feel it too, don't you?" he whispered, not turning. "That I don't belong here." Zara stepped forward and placed her hands on his shoulders. "No," she said firmly. "What I feel is you fighting something that isn't yours. And I won't let it steal you from me." She pressed her forehead to his. "Do you remember the first time you saw me awake on your ship?" He nodded slowly. "You called me grease and regret. And I told you your eyes were the color of storm clouds over water, she said. Not human oceans, not silvery seas, something in between, something new. She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. That moment wasn't programmed. It was ours. And every one since has been too. Then she did something no silvery royal had done in recorded history. She initiated a soul echo, a forbidden silvery ritual that fused two consciousnesses for exactly 7 heartbeats, allowing each to experience the other's memories, emotions, and truths as their own. It was dangerous, unstable, often fatal. Zara, no, Jorik began. Trust me, she said. Before he could protest, she placed both palms on his temples. Light erupted not from the registry, but from them. Green and silver, human and alien, memory and moment, fear and faith. In those 7 heartbeats, Jorik saw everything. Her childhood, lonely and burdened by duty. Her terror in the escape pod, certain she'd die alone. The relief when she saw his face. Human, flawed, kind. The first time she realized she missed his terrible jokes. The night she cried when he fixed her broken ceremonial dagger with glue and wire because it still meant something to you. The 1,000 quiet ways she'd learned to love him, not despite his humanity, but because of it. And Zara saw him too. A boy grieving a mother he barely remembered. A young man signing up for the freighter corps just to escape Earth's ruins. The loneliness of drifting between stars, never belonging anywhere. The awe in his chest when he first saw her green skin glow under the twin moons. The moment he decided, right there in the debris field, that he'd rather die than let her vanish into the void. When the light faded, they both collapsed to their knees, gasping, but unshaken. The whisper was gone. Because now Jorik knew beyond biology, beyond programming, beyond doubt, that his love for Zara was his own. Not inherited, not implanted, chosen, again and again. And Zara knew she'd never been more certain of anything in her life. They emerged from the sanctum hand in hand, not as princess and consort, but as partners, equals, soul-bound by something no algorithm could replicate. News of their unity spread like wildfire through the Dominion. The people, once skeptical of a human consort, now spoke of Jorik with reverence, not as an outsider, but as the one who stood when others would have fled, who loved when others would have doubted, who chose truth over comfort. The Earth Coalition, sensing their influence waning, made one final play. They sent a dreadnought to the edge of silvery space, broadcasting a final ultimatum. Surrender Jorik, or face annihilation. Zara didn't hesitate. She broadcast her own message, not from the throne room, but from the hangar bay, standing beside Jorik as he powered up a retrofitted starfighter of his own design. It bore no royal insignia, just 2 symbols, a wrench crossed with a silvery sunburst. If you want him, Zara declared to the galaxy, her voice ringing with power and warmth, you'll have to go through me, and every pilot, engineer, soldier, and citizen who stands with us. Because this isn't just a bond between 2 people. It's a new kind of hope. The coalition hesitated. Then, to everyone's surprise, their dreadnought powered down its weapons. A single message came through: we misjudged you. The experiment is terminated. Project Dawnchild is free. Jorik exhaled. It was over. In the weeks that followed, the palace changed. Not in structure, but in spirit. Human music played alongside silvery choral harmonies. Earth-style coffee stands appeared in the courtyards. Jorik started a training program for mixed-species engineering teams, and Zara revised the royal succession laws to include bonds of choice, not just blood. And on the night of the twin moons eclipse, a rare celestial event where both of Vexor Prime's moons aligned to cast the world in silver shadow, Zara led Jorik to the highest balcony of the palace. No guards, no attendants, just them, the stars, and the quiet hum of a world at peace. She took his hands. You once said you didn't belong in palaces, she said softly. But look around. You didn't just fit in, Jorik Veldrin. You rebuilt the palace in your own image, warmer, kinder, more alive. He smiled, brushing a strand of white hair from her face. And you didn't just save me from the war. You gave me a home. Then, under the twin moons, Jorik knelt. Not in submission, but in promise. I'm not royalty, he said. I'm just a mechanic who got lucky. You're my miracle, she whispered. And when he asked, in his clumsy but earnest way, if she'd bond with him, not as a political act, but as lovers choosing each other for the rest of their lives, Zara didn't just say yes. She kissed him, right there, as the moons touched and the stars held their breath. From that day on, the people of Vexor Prime no longer spoke of the human consort or the alien princess. They spoke of Zara and Jorik, the ones who proved that love wasn't about species or stars or bloodlines. It was about showing up, staying, choosing each other, even when the universe tried to pull them apart. And in their shared laughter, in the quiet hum of their workshop, in the way their hands always found each other in a crowd, they built not just a life, but a legacy. A small, happy, satisfying ending. Not because the dangers had vanished, but because they'd faced them together. And that, in the end, was enough.